Right, guys. Yes, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Teams Like Brighton, and I hope we have all calmed down. I have only just about managed to at the moment, because now, ladies and gentlemen, we have to look forward to the next game, which is the small matter of dealing with Arsenal away. So not exactly the easiest game on paper to deal with, to bounce back after such a humbling defeat, shall we say. Richie, let's go ahead straight in. What are your thoughts on this match?
Yes, it's they don't get too much tougher than this. Obviously, the Brighton have got Manchester City in not too long, later this month. But yes, hopefully, and obviously just probably a bit of context for people who don't know, Tom is still trying to come down from the horrible 5-1 loss against Everton. Sorry, not Arsenal. Everton from Monday. So yes, this is a pretty tough one. I did like De Zerbi's comment not too long after the game. He said, I'm not sure if I said this on Monday's podcast, but he said, I spoke with the players as I do after every game. It can happen to lose this type of game. If you attack, you can concede more goals. I think on Sunday against Arsenal, we will show our quality. We will get back to our style, and you will see the true Brighton. Interesting enough, I think I saw an article today that might have been in the Mail, and it basically said that if Brighton have over sort of 60% possession, 6 or 70% possession, no, 70% possession, they struggle. They don't break teams down well enough. They have all the chances, but they can't break them down. I don't think that they will have 70% possession against Arsenal this weekend. I'm pretty sure of that. Brighton, I think, are one, if not in the top 2 for possession stats in the league. I think Arsenal probably in the top 5. I'm really looking forward to this one because Brighton have a good recent history at the Emirates. Obviously, there was that fantastic 2-1 win just over a year ago now, when they won 2-1 at the Emirates after a horrible run of, I think, was it 6 defeats in a row, and then they drew with Norwich after the international break, and then fantastic performance to beat Arsenal at Arsenal. Bless his soul, Enoch Mwepu scored an absolutely brilliant goal in that game. Was probably the man of the match, and that was also Caicedo's, I believe, his Premier League debut. It's pretty nuts to think that was just over a year ago, and now he's, you could probably get 100 million for him. It's crazy. So, and then obviously in November, they beat them pretty well in the Carabao Cup, 3-1 win, but then lost 4-2 at the Amex in December. So Brighton have shown that under De Zerbi, they can beat a Mikel Arteta team. Arsenal were really sort of caught Brighton out with their really, really high attacking pressing line in that win at the Amex. I think we've seen a number of ways that you can beat a De Zerbi team. It's, for example, Everton. I mean, it helps when De Zerbi's team are off the pace a little bit and or tired, as the case at Forest. But I think you either just putting it, in being a bit reductive. You either sit back, have a low block, and then try to hit them on the counter, or you press them really, really high up the pitch, which it takes a lot of doing. It's not easy to do because Brighton are so slick at the back, but Arsenal did find a way through. So it'll be very interesting to see, one, if Brighton have recovered physically from a very busy run of fixtures, and if mentally they're up for taking on, Premier League title challenges, Arsenal on their own patch. I mean, it'll be fantastic. I think a result would be, just getting a draw would be a good result, just to, because you've got a really tough run. We've got Arsenal next, and then you've got Newcastle away. So that could be potentially 3 defeats in a row. They do have the benefit of having games in hand. Then they've got probably a game that they should win against Southampton, and then City, obviously at home, and then Aston Villa. So I don't think the expectations are too high for this one, but I definitely think I definitely think they will want to bounce back after a pretty humbling performance. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I think you summed it up well in that last sentence. Really, we need a result. We need to get a result quickly. Otherwise, we're going to be finding ourselves really desperately finding those points in probably more difficult fixtures. Newcastle away. Well, we've seen Arsenal manage to get a result against them, but then again, there are 16 points between those two sides, despite the fact there's only one place between them. So you can see where the gulf is between the top two and the rest of the top four this season. So I don't think we should really be pushing ourselves that much against Newcastle. It's going to be a tough place, especially when it's on the Thursday night. I don't think many fans are going there, judging by the ticket sales that we've seen on the site. So that's going to be a hard one. City's going to be an even tougher one. Southampton on paper should be the case, but then there's a part of me that thinks, well, relegation could be confirmed to them sooner rather than later. So where we're going to get these results from? And sorry, going back to that Southampton thing, the funny thing is you usually see is that when a team is confirmed with relegation, they tend to get the results afterwards because they've got nothing to play for. So you're in a really catch-22, really, going like, great, we're facing the bottom of the table. On the other hand, they've got nothing to play for. They've got nothing to lose. So they're the most dangerous opponent, really, when you think about it. Then you've got the small matter of Villa and City as well. So I think I'm going to say the old cliche here, but you know, these games are going to define our season. We're into the last 5 matches now. We've got 2 weeks left of the season now, so we really need to push on from this 3 weeks even, and just try and get these results in. We need to, if we could get a win again against Arsenal, if we could get a win similar to what we did last season when we were on the 7-8 win losing streak, fantastic, happy days. Sadly, I'm gutted that I've missed out on getting tickets to that game because I was really looking forward to that one. I think that's going to be a special match, and that packed away end can really carry teams at the Emirates if push comes to shove. But look, they're fighting for a title as well, and they're going to be looking to get as many points as they possibly can in their last 3 matches. So it all counts for them as much as it all counts for us. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But it is an interesting stat you're saying about the whole, if Brighton have 70 or more % of the possession. Because I do kind of feel like whenever we're in control of that possession, I feel like the other teams respond with a really low block. And like you say, it's difficult to manage that. It's difficult to break down. It's harder to find those gaps that De Zerbi likes to find when on the ball. So you're going to get that more when you're playing like for like. And I think that could be the case here. If we can get a good couple of counter-attacks in, where we get a few chances, all of a sudden momentum could be shoving our way. So hopefully we could go to that case, and Arsenal pick up their fourth match without a win in their last 6 matches, and that'd be lovely.
I think one thing that I'm intrigued to see is because there's been so many games, and obviously injuries have taken its toll. Brighton are we're currently speaking on the Thursday ahead of De Zerbi's press conference on the Friday, but Brighton are sadly now, it looks like we'll get more information on this, but it'll probably mean that Solly March is out for the season because he looked like he hurt his hamstring or maybe even tore it against Everton. He's scored, I think, 7 goals and 7 assists in the Premier League this season. So that's, a big loss. And Lana's out for the season. Obviously, Yakamoto's long-term absentee still out. Tarek Lamptey's probably out for the season. Jeremy Sarmiento probably out for the season. Joel Veltman hopefully will be back soon. We really need him. I think you can only ask so much of Pascal Gross to keep on playing at right back. So it's becoming a bit more of a threadbare squad. And unfortunately, I wouldn't say found out, but I do think Matoma's not playing quite as well. There's been a couple of guys in the last... Obviously, Wan-Bissaka did a real number on him at Wembley. I thought it was a more even battle at the Amex when Brighton beat United last week.
Yep.
But even then, Bissaka still pretty much, I'd say held his own. He got a good couple of shots himself. And then it looked like it was going to be business as usual against Everton, against young Nathan Patterson. But then he got the upper hand against Matoma as the first half wore on. And then I would say probably won that battle in the second half. So I spoke to a couple of the...
and he should have passed as well.
Yes. Spoke to a couple of Japanese reporters who basically follow Matoma every single game. It's quite interesting to see that because you don't really get that with other... well, I haven't experienced it in terms of journalists purely following one player. Apparently, Tomiyasu at Arsenal is less talkative, whereas Matoma literally speaks to the same group every single game. But he basically, apparently he said to them that he wants to play every game. He wants to play every minute. It's not a case of, I need a bit of a rest to maybe recover my strength or find my mojo again. He wants to keep on playing, and I think he'll keep on at it. So hopefully... he was pretty lethal in the games against Arsenal this season. He scored at the Amex and he scored at the Emirates. So hopefully he can sort of find his form once again. So I think it's a question of it's not great when you have obviously players not in form and also injuries. Would you make any changes, Tom, to the lineup at all? I mean, I guess we haven't really got that many options. But would you maybe, just saying, would you bring back Cole? Would you start Gilmore in midfield? Would you? I assume you'd probably want Ferguson starting up front. And then obviously we talked about it on Monday. Perhaps Sanchez in goal over Steele.
Yeah, I think we're going to expect a few changes. I think Webster's going to get dropped. I think Steele's place is going to be in contention as well. I do think if Ferguson's fit enough to start, then I do think that he will be starting. If not, it's going to be Welbeck and maybe Ferguson's second half just to see what we could do there. I reckon Undav's going to get dropped and Gilmore brought in. I think if we get a 3-man central midfield in there, then we could be seeing something a little bit different. Gilmore's been really impressive. I was quite surprised the fact that he didn't feature in the Everton match as much as we hoped. I know he came on for a cameo towards the end after Solly March was injured. So I'm hoping Gilmore gets a feature because I think now that he's getting a run of games in a few more minutes under his belt, he's starting to come alive a little bit, which is great to see. Whereas, Solly March got pushed on. De Zerbi took a risk with him and his hammy went. So there's not much we can really do about that. It'll be interesting to see what happened, what the latest is on that in the press conference for De Zerbi. Buonanotte, don't think he's going to start either. Then again, I don't know who's going to start in front of him. When I look at the squads, I think probably Enciso might come in, maybe. I know Yasin Yari's plays in the middle, but maybe he might play as like an inverted winger. Who knows? So the options are very, very limited for De Zerbi right now. Yeah, there's a lot of young prospects coming in. Yari's one, Paul Van Heck's another, Andrew Moran's another. But are they ready to really push on with us in Europe? I don't think that's going to be the case. But I can see De Zerbi getting forced to play some of these youngsters going forward, which could be a bit of a concern. But I think that's just a case of, it's the luck of the draw that we've got at the moment. We've dealt with some really nasty injuries. We've lost a talented midfielder in Enoch and Wepu through his condition. So there's a lot of drawbacks that we've suffered at the Albion this season. And when you look back on it, you just kind of can't help but think that, blimey, we've achieved a lot already this season, considering what has been thrown at us. And still looking back on this, I still can't help but think that Spurs match hurts more than the Everton loss. Just reflecting on this week, it still hurts. I'm sorry. I know people have told me to move on from it, but I can't. I can't. I have lived and breathed the Albion for so many years of my life, and I just can't believe that our biggest chance of getting European football could be in the balance, because Spurs robbed us of 3 points. Still fuming over that, Richie. Still fuming. But
yeah,
then
I
again,
think the only way that we won't obviously think about that is if Brighton finish ahead of them in the league. I think that's the only thing. But yeah, if that could be the case. It's just but let's not go down that rabbit hole, because that's not a nice place to go.
But like, the reassuring thing is that we are 7th right now, which means that all things being equal, if United and City stay in the top 4, one of them goes on to win the FA Cup, City, that means that another Europa League place has dropped to 6th, which means the Europa League conference spot is dropped to 7th, which is where we are, which means, as things stand, we are potentially on course for Europe, which is amazing, and we can all be looking forward to our weird and wacky trips around Europe 3 times on a Thursday later on this year in October and November and December.
Fingers crossed. But yes, segueing on, well, you mentioned Europe. I wrote an article today about Andy Zakiri, who's obviously not really had much joy since his move from Lausanne in 2020. He's only played, I think, 13 times for Brighton, and quite a few of those. And I think this is probably Graham Potter, what were you thinking? Left wing back? No. Sorry. he wasn't given much of a chance. He only played 13 times. He scored 1 goal, but for quite a few of those, he was playing at left wing back. He was playing out of position. He wasn't really given the chance. He then had a disappointing loan spell in the Bundesliga last season with, I think it's Augsburg.
Yes.
And yeah, so I think he scored 2 goals in 20 games or something like that. But he's having a bit more joy on loan at FC Basel, where he has scored 16 goals in 44 games. So not like mind-blowing figures, but an improvement for sure. So the 23-year-old moved to the Swiss side, his native Switzerland, on a loan-to-buy deal. So if things go well, Basel can take up that option and he can become their player permanently. He's still got more than a year left in his contract at the Amex. So I'm just going to read you some comments from his agent, Mikel Schürrle. Probably butchering that pronunciation, but I will read it. So he basically says, Zakiri is happy and is only thinking about the present and doing well. Basel have a right to buy, which can be exercised. Oh, I've just lost it. Sorry. My icon thing just went for the whole screen, so that threw me off. Excellent work. So that can be exercised before the last match of the season. And he then says, going back to Brighton, I would like to add that we meet every 10 days with the English team. Basel would like to redeem him, but there is an economic reality behind it. If we look at the statistics, it is logical that they would like to keep him, but they have to see if they are able to. Eventually, we could talk to other teams if he's not redeemed. He only has 1 year left in his contract at Brighton, but he has to play there next season because there will be the European Championships. And essentially, he wants, to get called up for Switzerland because he says Zakiri represents the future of the national team. And just to add, he said, there are several teams that have already contacted me to buy him. Zakiri played in the Juventus youth team. He likes Italy and Serie A. After the matches against Fiorentina at the end of May, we'll talk about the redemption. So somewhat up in the air what happens. Tom, would you like to see him given a redemption at Brighton, or do you think that ship has sailed?
No, give him a chance. Give him a chance, I think. Give us some more options, because I can't stress this enough. Like, look at the situation that we're in right now with injuries and woes at the moment. You know, we're stretching an attacking midfielder playing right wing or left wing at the moment in Buonanotte. You know, we've got no Solly March now, so we're losing another winger. He's someone that can play up front. He's someone that can play on the wings. He can definitely offer us something a little bit more. He can provide a bit of competition with Matoma on the left. It gives us the perfect opportunity. If we get Europe, it's the perfect opportunity for us to kind of like say, okay, let's see what you're worth. You've learned a lot. He's got 16 goals in 44 appearances. But yeah, people are going to say, yeah, but the Swiss league is different. And to which I'm going to say, yeah, Moises Caicedo was quite average in the Belgian Pro League, really. And Beerschot, well, I think last time I checked, they got relegated. So, you know, he had a pretty average spot, but we knew what we needed. And Caicedo's been fantastic for us ever since. Look what's happened there. And I think that there is something in there in Zakiri that can really help us up and push on for us next season. Whether that's helping us with squad depth or providing serious competition on the wings or up front, let's explore it because De Zerbi needs the options. Yeah, João Pedro's in the mix as well.
Yeah,
but I think let's get some more players in because we quite clearly need it.
Yes, I wonder because this we can open up a sort of a wider conversation about Brighton's loan army because it is a loan army. It's a never-ending conveyor belt of possible talent. We don't quite know how good they're going to be. So I've just got a list of some players. So just sticking with forwards. One, I think I know the answer of what you're going to say, but the other one is maybe a little bit of a.
I love how you don't even have to say anything for the first one. You just know, I just know who it is. The listeners will know who we're on about as well.
Okay. Abdullah Simmer.
Yeah.
You didn't expect that one, did you?
No, I didn't expect that one. I didn't expect.
Oh yeah, so the two I obviously talk about. Just looking at some of the loanies out here at the moment. So obviously on top of Zakiri, there's also Aaron Connolly, who has been on loan at Hull City, and then Abdullah Simmer, who's been on loan at French side Angers, who have already been relegated. So he has scored 4 goals and bagged 2 assists in 30 games. And Aaron Connolly obviously had a really, really. It looked like he might have. He was very. It looked like he was maturing a bit, just in terms of his comments, a bit more introspective and saying the things he shouldn't have done in the past. But he had a loan move that didn't really go to plan at Venezia. He barely played there, and then showed a bit more promise at Hull. But unfortunately, an injury curtailed his season, and he hasn't played since after scoring, I think, 2 goals in a game. So, what's your thoughts on Connolly and Simmer?
Connolly, no, straight away. I think he had his really big chance, and I don't think he took it. I feel that if he comes back, I don't think it's going to help him personally because I think he needs minutes. He needs football week in, week out. He's that kind of player. I think a lot of people are talking about how he's just taking water on the duck's back over at Hull. Yeah, his injury's been curtailed. His season's been curtailed with an injury, but I think he probably should stay at Hull. To be honest with you, I don't think the Premier League really at the moment is his level, let alone top aside in the top 6, top 7. So I think Connolly needs to be shipped out and just say, you tried your best, mate, but you need to really push on because I think he's 24 next year, so he really needs to just take the opportunities as it comes. As for Simmer, I feel sorry for him because he got a really nasty injury at Stoke, I believe.
He had multiple injuries. Really, he got so unlucky there.
He was so unlucky, and I think that's really hampered his development. So, it depends what the likes of what David Weir and Gordon Greer see in him in terms of his loan performances, what the aims were in that loan performance, in that loan season. They knew when they sent him to Angers that, he's going to be in for an absolute relegation dogfight where it's a foregone conclusion what's going to happen there. In Ligue 1, they have 4 relegation spots this season because they're reducing their league from 20 to 18. So, I think it was always going to be a foregone conclusion, and I think he was just there just to get minutes under his belt and a bit of confidence. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But personally, for me, I know you asked me on Connolly and Seamer, but I'm really excited for Simon Adingra coming over.
Yes, well, we'll move on to him as well. So obviously we've yes, the Watford guys coming over, which is exciting, I guess. So in terms of the wingers, we've got Simon Adingra, who I believe is their top scorer this season. I think he's in double figures. And there's also Reda Kadra, who I don't think he's had a tougher loan season in comparison to last, where I think he was one of their best players for Blackburn. And then it looked like he was going on the next sort of stage of his progression by going to, Sheffield United, who obviously have now been promoted back to Premier League. So one of the big guns, and it looked like, if he can play there, then that's another good step up for him. But it never really worked out for there at the Blades. It seemed as if he just didn't really fit in Hecking Bottom's team, and then he was then he spent the second half of this season on loan at Birmingham. So it seems that I remember when I think it was in the 2021 season he came on as a 19-year-old for his Premier League debut away at Man City, and there's a couple of his under 23 goals were absolutely incredible, like absolute fantastic pace, brilliant skill, unbelievable shot on him. He seems like a real talent. I wonder if he's still a little bit raw. I remember there were times when Tony Mowbray was quoted as saying, like, I'm screaming at him on the pitch because he doesn't have he doesn't have so much of a football brain as maybe like a Pascal Gross does. He obviously didn't quote saying Pascal Gross, but he maybe needs a bit more direction on the field than others do. So yeah, with Kadra, he's turning 22 this summer, and Adingra's I think turning 21, or might have already turned 21 or something like that. So yes, Adingra to follow in Matoma's footsteps. And what do you reckon about Kadra?
Absolutely, I think he's going to be following in Matoma's footsteps, and then Davs in the fact that he's done wonders over at USG, and I think next season he's going to be ready for a place in the Premier League squad. In terms of Kadra, I do feel sorry for him because I think if that 4-5 year project that Potter had in mind when he started off at the club was still in place right now, I think we would see Kadra in this squad right now. I don't think a lot of the players, a lot of the staff, backroom staff, and the board expected us to just skyrocket so much as we have done in the last season and a bit. And I think that's where Kadra's kind of just got himself in a bit of no man's land there. I think he's been caught out with that. I think he's good enough for the Premier League. Do I think he's good enough to help us just push on that little bit more? I don't know. I think the loan spell at Sheffield United didn't help. Personally, I think he should have stayed. He should have had another year at Blackburn Rovers. It seemed to work out really well there. He was thought really highly of by the fans. I think he was player of the season there as well.
Van Heck was player of the season.
Yes.
But Kadra was, I think, in the top 3 or something like that.
Yeah. So again, like Van Heck was there, but he's been in and out of the squad. So I think that kind of gives you the hint of where Kadra is at the moment and the quality that we have as it is. Is he going to be a viable option? I don't think so. It would be interesting to see what happens next. But personally, for me, Simon Adingwood comes in, Zakiri comes in, maybe push. I think we might see De Zerbi really value the options there and just give them a chance. If they don't respond quick enough, then we'll push on and we'll move on to the next step. We've still got our club record signing João Pedro coming to us as well, which I think is a fantastic bit of business. So the future is bright for next season, I think. And it's really bizarre for me to say that, because usually when you see, clubs of our stature that achieve these kind of heights, you kind of look at us and go, well, what now? And you kind of find yourself in this moment where you just got to enjoy the squad. But we've got so many players to look forward to seeing in a blue and white shirt. It kind of makes you feel a little bit better in terms of how this season could possibly end. At least gives you a little bit of a positive note to end on if things go sour at Villa Park.
Yeah, I think the point you touched upon about sort of the progression is really interesting, because it's almost like that, the club made these sort of future signings. Oh, I've lost Tom.
No, I'm just trying to charge my laptop.
So I wasn't that boring. Yeah. So, but yeah, just in terms of, so the trajectory was, kind of just steady, and then it just went whoosh like that to go to ninth. And so like you say, the plans to have players who were maybe to a lower to middling club might have been okay, but now it's like, well, we've just gone through the roof. So how do you prepare for that? Are these players now not good enough? And Brighton have a humongous amount of players out on loan. So unfortunately, a lot of people, I think, are probably going to be disappointed. Wrapping up the loan thing, and then we'll move on to Arsenal, where we will talk to Kaya Kaynak of Football London for the Arsenal perspective. In midfield, Tom, obviously the big question marks this summer were Caicedo and McAllister. Will they go, or will or won't they go? Sorry. In terms of the options Brighton have, it's maybe not as much strength and depth as we would like, and certainly not to this near enough a level, I think, to the dizzying heights of a Caicedo and McAllister. So out on loan, Steven Alzate, doing pretty well at Standard Liège. Interesting one there. And then a little bit younger guys. You've got, I think it's probably a bit too big a jump for the time being. You've got Mark Leonard, who's on loan at Northampton Town, and they just got promoted from League Two. But to go from League Two to Premier League is probably a bridge too far. I think maybe another loan spell, perhaps at League One or Championship level, would be good. Similar with Kasper Kozlowski. He hasn't had that much, I think, joy at Vitesse in the Dutch league, and I think he wasn't as the loan spell at Union wasn't as fruitful as he would have liked. And then you've also got Jensen Weir, who was at Morecambe, but he couldn't stop them from getting relegated from League One. So, and just to wrap it all up, different position, Hayden Roberts, out of contract this summer, but I think there is an option to extend it. I could be wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if Brighton did exercise that. Well, maybe give him a new 1 year deal. So on those four, Alzate, just to confirm, Taylor Richards has left Brighton. Bit of breaking news for you. He was on a loan to buy deal at QPR, and that has now been sorted. So he's now with them. Unfortunately, that didn't really work out, but there you go. So Alzate, I guess Leonard, Kozlowski, Weir, and Roberts.
Yeah. So Leonard and Weir, I think they're still a good few years behind even the talk of them being in the Premier League. So I think another loan spell for them will help them develop further. Hayden Roberts, I think we should definitely give him another contract. He's definitely, I think he's going to be someone that De Zerbi is going to be really keen to teach and develop. He's 21. I think he had a pretty decent season for Derby anyway. Again, he's 21 years old, and I think when I've seen him on the telly, he carries himself really well. So I think give him that pre-season, see where he is on loan, and explore that opportunities. Stephen Alzate, I mean, I've made it no secret on this podcast. I'm a big Alzate fan. I think he's a fantastic central midfielder, and I think De Zerbi will really benefit him. And I think he could be a really good shoe-in. I think he could be a really good squad player for us, and really do wonders for us when he's called upon whenever we have those fixture congested moments. If we get Europe.
Just really quickly, sorry, on him, I think he has essentially said that he is pretty happy at the age. And the reason why is that he's playing week in, week out. So going by your comments, it doesn't, maybe he would have to settle to being a squad player at Brighton, which might not be enough.
Well, look, I can't argue with that. If he wants minutes under his belt, then yeah, he probably has to seek elsewhere. But then again, to counteract that, Alexis McAllister could be leaving. We could be seeing Moises Caicedo leaving as well. So, there could be opportunities for him to fight for a place in the squad, and he could turn around to be a really good, an absolute baller for us. Who knows? As for Kasper Kozlowski, I wasn't expecting him to, for a stat padding season for Vitesse because, well, it's Vitesse over in the Eredivisie, and really that they are at that level. They're feeder club from Chelsea, and they're benefiting from us with Kozlowski. He's had 6 goal involvements, which I think is a pretty impressive achievement. He's created quite a lot there for a team of that stature, anyway, in terms of the competition that they have against them this season. I think shouldn't go unnoticed. He's on a long-term contract anyway, so regardless, he's going to be on our books, whether that's going to be on loan or in the squad next season. Again, let's see what happens, because he's someone that's been talked of really, really highly of, in the same category as Caicedo and McAllister was when we signed them. So for me, let's see what happens. Why not? We've got nothing to lose there, really. And just around as well, that I'm not surprised with the Taylor Richards thing. Again, he falls under the same category as Kadra, but even then, Richards has been a rotation player at best. I think he's only made like 15 appearances this season for QPR too, and QPR have had some bizarre season where they were flirting with promotion and then they find themselves in a relegation scrap battle.
He's another player who's had a lot of injuries, sadly.
Exactly. So I think that's really hampers his development, and I think we could have seen a different Taylor Richards to that of what we see today if injuries don't happen. But that's just sadly, that's just the nature of the game that we know and love. Sadly, and we haven't even touched on Kel Sherpen, who is probably showing to just leave this at some point in the summer. I can't see him going anywhere else. And then Mikhail Kapovnik, who the left back, who now identifies himself as a central midfielder, which is just utterly bizarre. I'm actually just going to try and find out whereabouts he's actually been playing for. Is it Fortuna Düsseldorf?
Yeah, but I think he's actually been predominantly, the vast majority of the time, actually playing at left back. So
yeah, so there's the bizarre situation we're in there. So unless he wants to come back here and but he's on an option to buy, by the sounds of it. So I think their patience has been run out. Yeah, he played two matches, in defensive midfield. One of them was against Greuther Fürth for 1 minute, and then he played a whole match in defensive mid against St. Pauli. And that was only back in November. The rest of the time, it's left back every single time. And even then, he's been on the bench. He's had muscular problems this season alone. So again, it's just going to be a case of you're not where we wanted you to be. So we'll just take up on that opportunity, just say goodbye.
Yeah, I think just to round up, I think obviously when you have so many of these players out there on loan, unfortunately, some are going to be let go, and it's not going to be a happy ending for them in terms of playing for Brighton. But I think what Brighton do pretty well is that these are still, I mean, pretty much all of these players, well, so many of them are cheap buys. So they're not missing out. It's not like I think the days of, well, touch wood, the days of a Jurgen Locadia, and Alireza Jahanbakhsh, sort of big money signings where they're potentially they end up being transfer flops, are hopefully done. But we shall see. But yes, good chat, Tom. Really enjoyed that. But yes, let's move on to this weekend where we talk to Kaya about this upcoming game against Arsenal. And I am delighted to say that we are joined by Kaya Kaynak, the chief Arsenal writer for Football London. Kaya, how are you doing?
I'm very good, Richie. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, second time. You're part of a pretty impressive pool of journalists who are in that second appearance marker. So congrats to you, dear boy. Right, let's crack on. So yes, Brighton travels to Arsenal on Sunday. The last time these two teams met, Arsenal beat Brighton 4-2 in a pretty nuts game where Arsenal initially blew them away and then Brighton got back into it and almost provided a bit of a scare for them. I guess ahead of this game, I'd like to know, what's the mood amongst the camp? Obviously, Arsenal had a big lead and then City have caught them, but they're still sort of keeping them honest. What's the kind of feeling amongst Brighton players and fans at the moment?
Yeah, it's pretty good right now. I think if you'd asked me last week prior to the Newcastle game, then I would have given you a very different answer. But that Newcastle victory and such a statement performance at such a difficult ground to go to, where only Liverpool have won all season, and arguably no one has outplayed Newcastle in the way that Arsenal did. It was a very tight game. It's a very high quality game. But Arsenal were the better side definitely on the day and could even have won by more. And that kind of display is the kind of display that just builds a little bit of momentum and just keeps things going. Obviously, Arsenal were on a run of 4 games without a win before that, and they'd beaten Chelsea just before the Newcastle game. But prior to that, it was 4 games without a win, and the mood was pretty down. The 3 draws in the build-up to Man City had meant sort of they'd blown that lead at the top of the table, like you said, and it was looking pretty ropey. And there was sort of a school of thought that will Arsenal just tail off completely? Will they completely blow the title and let Man City win it by 8, 10, 12 points, however many you want? And that would have been really disappointing given how good a season Arsenal have had. But thankfully, it seems like they're going to try and push City all the way to the line. And I think it could be impacted by, as well, the Man City result. Obviously, they're playing earlier in the day up against Everton. It'll be interesting to see what impact that has on Arsenal. Will they go into the game thinking, wow, this is our chance to get back into top sport? Or will they be thinking, we need to keep the pressure up on Manchester City? It's a really intriguing psychological battle, but the mood around Arsenal is pretty good right now.
Kai, I want to talk about the 2 big injury setbacks that have been confirmed in the last 24 hours. William Saliba and Alexander Zinchenko both ruled out for the rest of the season. How big of a miss will that be for 2 pretty key players in Mikel Arteta's side?
I think when it comes to Saliba, honestly, Arsenal have been without him for over a month now. So they've been able to cope. And speaking to people around the club and the vibe you've got pretty much ever since the Man City game, where it was, will Saliba be fit? Will they inject him full of painkillers just to get him on the pitch? That kind of thing. It's always been, well, there's not much point rushing Saliba back now. Let's sort of save him up and get him ready for the start of next season, which I think is the plan. It doesn't require surgery, his injury. So that's good. But without him, it's obviously a massive blow for Arsenal, even though Jakub Kiwior has come in and done pretty well the past couple of games in replacing Rob Holding. He looks a lot more solid. The Arsenal backline looks a lot more settled. But what you lose with Kiwior, who is obviously a left footer, playing on the right side of the defence, is that build-up down the right-hand side. And Bukayo Saka has been quite quiet in the games that Kiwior's played, and that's because Arsenal struggled to get the ball to him as much, so they attack more down the left. And so that's a massive blow for Arsenal. Zinchenko, there is an argument that he might not have even started this game anyway on form. Kieran Tierney came on at Newcastle and was fantastic in the final half an hour. It was sort of the Newcastle attack was really building up a head of steam, and Tierney just put a pin in that balloon. He just completely quietened them down. And that was massive for Arsenal on the day. It locked down the result. It made sure of the 3 points. And look, Kieran Tierney's not a bad backup by any stretch of the imagination. He was one of Arsenal's most important players for the past 2-3 seasons, pretty much since he came down from Celtic. And now that he's being thrown into the team again, I think most people are pretty comfortable with him being there. It obviously will be difficult given that Brighton have some very direct right wingers and some very difficult right wingers to track. But I'd like to think Kieran Tierney's a better 1v1 defender than Zinchenko. So arguably, I know Arsenal will probably lose a little bit in possession, but they'll gain a bit in defence, which I think up against a Brighton side who have been so good offensively under Roberto De Zerbi, that's going to be quite big for them.
You mentioned about Arsenal have sort of coped without Saliba. This is sort of a two-pronged one. Do you think that his absence has contributed to Arsenal's sort of drop in form? And what do you think is the main factor behind them essentially being overtaken by City during that spell of draws and losses?
I think it's a part. It's certainly, I don't think it's the main part, because Arsenal went to Liverpool and were pretty excellent for the first half an hour, 35 minutes, and then they defended pretty resolutely for most of the second half. And I know Rob Holding gave away a penalty up at Anfield, which Mo Salah missed, but I actually thought he played quite well there. It was the games after where maybe in terms of the build-up, that's where Arsenal were lacking. So Saliba's so good defensively, but he gives Arsenal so much offensively as well. He's a brilliant ball progressor. He's great at playing out from the back. And like I said to Tom there, if he's not on the pitch, Bukayo Saka doesn't see the ball as much, and Bukayo Saka is probably Arsenal's most dangerous attacking threat. So it's certainly been a big factor in why, if you like, the wheels have come off the Arsenal title race. And I think it's why they went into that Man City game with so little belief, because I think they really felt quite porous at the back. They didn't feel they'd be able to defend against Man City, and they struggled, and they didn't look like a team who thought they could win at the Etihad. But since Jakob Kiwior's come in, there does seem to be a bit more calmness and a bit more, assuredness at the back, which is massive for Arsenal, because suddenly when the back door is locked more tightly, you can go out and explore around the front, and that's big for them. But I wouldn't say he's the only reason Saliba's absence. I think defensively, generally, even before Saliba got injured, Arsenal were starting to concede more goals, and that's been a big issue. There was a few individual errors. I mentioned Zinchenko not being in the best of form. At Anfield, for example, he lets Trent Alexander-Arnold get by him too easy, and Liverpool equalise. At West Ham, Thomas Partey commits an individual error. Bukayo Saka misses a penalty. It's these really fine margins, which in a normal season against a normal opponent, 3 draws in a row, you could bounce back from that. And draws at maybe Anfield and West Ham, you wouldn't be saying a disastrous result. So I think the draw at Southampton at home is pretty difficult to spin. But the other two, you'd be saying, you can bounce back. But up against Man City, who are so relentless, and I think it's 15 wins in a row now, which is just unbelievable. You need perfection. And Arsenal haven't quite been able to do that. That's not saying they're a bad team. They're just not as good as this Man City side, who are unbelievable at the minute.
You said something quite interesting there about the wheels are off on the title race right now. Granted, you have played a game more the Arsenal have, and are just a point behind City. Now, the Albion have 5 games left, and that it does involve, obviously, the Gunners, City, and Newcastle. Could there be a situation still where maybe, just maybe, Arsenal's title hopes aren't just finished yet? Could we see a different turn in the events?
Yeah,
at the end of May.
Will Brighton be your saviour?
Well, that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping Brighton beat Newcastle and Man City and lose very generously to Arsenal. That'd be very kind. It's possible. It's not impossible. And I think for Arsenal, what's important is to keep it going until the final week of the season, because Man City, on paper, their toughest 2 fixtures are Brighton away and Brentford away, which are their final 2 games. And if Arsenal go into that final week of the season, allowing City the chance to win it at Brighton, or allowing City the chance to, basically have it wrapped up before then, that's not really something that is good for them. So they need to keep City honest. They need to keep pressing on City. They need to keep going. So it's not impossible. And City play an Everton side who are buoyed by the win at Brighton. I know I'm on a Brighton podcast, so I won't go into that in too much detail, but they're obviously in between the 2 Real Madrid games, and the hope from an Arsenal perspective is maybe they take their eye off the ball a little bit and Everton are somehow able to sneak a result. But listen, you're praying for a miracle at this point. And if City do go on to win every single game between now and the end of the season, like I say, I think that'll end up being something like 20 wins in a row, and fair play to them if that's what they're able to do. But it's a case of even if they do drop points in one game, Arsenal would still need them to drop points in another. So it does look very unlikely at the minute. It does look very difficult, but stranger things have happened. I think the season where Man City went on to win the league the first time around, that Aguero season, City were in a similar position where they were relatively far behind United, and then they were able to catch things up in the final few games. So Arsenal's job basically is just to keep the pressure on, win those final 3 games, and then hope things fall in their favour. But I think most people around the club have accepted it. It's very unlikely.
Just out of curiosity, so I guess from a Brighton perspective, I certainly take the view that this is a season where Brighton really need to capitalise, because you've got the likes of Chelsea are not at the races properly. Tottenham are a little bit out of sorts. Liverpool aren't, pushing for, well, obviously they have a chance at top 4, but usually, the title contenders. So I see this as a really good chance for Brighton to get top 4. Is there, I guess it's a bit further ahead, but with Arsenal, is there a case of, is this a massive missed opportunity if they don't get it, if teams come back full guns blazing next season?
I've heard that argument, and I do see the merit in it. And like you say, Chelsea have been way off it. Liverpool are in a transition phase. Man United are in a similar transition phase. Spurs, we don't really know what's going on with them. And yeah, you could argue that maybe Arsenal missed out on the opportunity. But again, I go back to how many points Man City are going to get towards the end of the season. And Arsenal, if they win all their games, will finish with 90 points. I don't know if you can classify that as a missed opportunity if a team finishes with the same number of points as the Invincibles got and they're unable to win the league. I don't know if that's maybe fair to classify it as a missed opportunity, but you do have to judge the season as it is. And yes, you could argue that. But then again, this Arsenal team is really young, and that's one of their biggest strengths. Their 2 best players, arguably, are both 21. Odegaard's only 24. The defenders, there's not a player in that starting defensive lineup who's over the age of 25. So that means that this Arsenal side is well set to carry on and keep challenging for years to come. And they're going to invest in the summer. They're going to try and bring in a few good players to supplement what they've already got and build to challenge in the Champions League as well as the Premier League. So I don't know if it's a case of Arsenal having to seize it this time. A bit like when Leicester won the Premier League, you really felt that, Leicester need to win it now because it will never happen again in their history. Whereas Arsenal, I feel like they're building something, and, Arteta's built the right culture. He's brought the right players in, and you can see where things are going. So I wouldn't say it's a massive missed opportunity in the sense that no one expected it to happen this year. But obviously, it'll be disappointing if they're not able to do it.
I'd quite like to throw that question over to what your thoughts are on the Albion. Obviously, the position that we're in at the moment it's incredible, but a few results, shall we say, haven't really gone our way at the moment. And like you say, capitalizing on missed opportunities haven't really happened either. How do you see the Albion season panning out, and do you think if we don't get Europe, is that going to be seen as a underwhelming season, or it's a job achieved?
So from my perspective, I think top 4 may just be out of reach for Brighton right now. I know I'm on a Brighton podcast, and I know I probably shouldn't say that, but I think with
that's Tom. Tom is that view. I'm of like Europe's good, but yeah.
Okay. Well, optimism's the way forward. I just think that fixture list is too difficult. I look at Man City away and I look at Newcastle. Is it Newcastle's away, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So those are 2 very difficult games, and obviously Arsenal away as well makes it a third. But if there's a team that have shown they can pull off a surprise result this season, even if you can call it a surprise anymore, it's Brighton. And I think the biggest credit to what they've done this season is in that FA Cup semi-final. You could argue they were favourites against Man United, and I know Man United are obviously way ahead in the league, but they spent a lot more money. They've done things a very different way to Brighton, and I think what I make of Brighton's season is it's been fantastic. And obviously they'll want to qualify for Europe, and if they don't even qualify for the Conference League, then there will be a massive disappointment in the short term. But you'll be able to look back on it in a few years' time, or maybe even a few months' time, and say, "Wow, what a season! No one saw this coming." And also, Brighton have done it in the right way. They've done it through outsmarting other Premier League teams, and it's telling that every single Big Six team seems to want every single Brighton player, and that's because of all the good job that Brighton have done. And I think they'll get Europa League. I think there's teams that will drop points within that group. I don't see Aston Villa winning all their games. I definitely don't see Spurs winning all their games. So there's a possibility. Liverpool are a bit of an unknown factor in the sense that they haven't been very consistent until this point of the season, but suddenly they seem to have found some consistency. But I reckon Brighton can make the Europa League spots. And even if they just finish Conference League, I think it's still a massive achievement. It'll be Brighton's first ever season in Europe. And obviously it's going to be difficult to hold on to this squad of players, and players like Caicedo being linked with a move away. I think Mitoma's being linked with a move away as well, isn't he? There's lots of important players being linked away, but Brighton's sort of superpower is whenever someone leaves, they seem to have someone who you've never heard of that they can just pull out of the woodwork and then play him instead. So that is why, a bit like Arsenal, to be honest, I think the fact that, yes, it's been a singular good season, but also the groundwork and the roots underneath it have been built to ensure that this can be sustained and keep going for years to come. So whereas I think Spurs have a very difficult job getting back into Europe, as in the top 6 places next season, I think the same for Chelsea, and I think Liverpool have a lot of question marks they still need to answer. Brighton, I feel like, with their defined style of play, with their manager, hopefully they're able to keep De Zerbi, and with these sort of never-ending conveyor belt of talent that they seem to be able to unearth from across the world, I think they can sustain this, and I really hope they do, because Brighton's a great club, and I really, really enjoy watching them. Except for on Sunday, where I hope they lose. No offense.
Yes, yeah. Well, you did so well up until that point, but yeah, obviously. Final one from me. Just want to add. So you touched upon obviously Brighton's coveted players. This is maybe a bit of an unfair question, but can you see Arsenal? Obviously, Caicedo basically said, "I want to join up Arsenal in January." Didn't happen. Can you see Arsenal going back in for him, or do you think a potential price tag of upwards of 70, 80, even more potentially would put them off? Or would they go for any other Brighton players?
Well, Arsenal have money, and a lot of the talk around the Mudryk deal in January, when Chelsea came in with a silly offer of 100 million euros on an 8-year contract, a lot of the talk was, well, Arsenal can't afford to match that. And that wasn't true. Arsenal have the financial muscle to be able to pay those big fees if they want to, but they'll only pay them if they think the deal is right, and they're not afraid to walk away from deals if they feel that they're overspending on players. I think when it comes to Caicedo, the big thing to consider is Arsenal's primary midfield target this summer is Declan Rice, and Rice can play both as the more defensive 6 role and the more offensive 8 role, and I think that versatility and obviously the leadership and ability to intercept and all those kind of things lend themselves to Arsenal wanting Rice, and that's the player they're going for as their primary target this summer. But that doesn't mean that they won't try and go for Caicedo too. A lot of it depends on what happens with Granit Xhaka, who's attracting interest from Bayer Leverkusen and has just 1 year remaining on his contract, although Arsenal have the option to extend that. So there's a lot of ifs and buts. Arsenal could come back in for Caicedo. It wouldn't surprise me. Whether they'd be able to, having said, they've got money, whether they'd be able to sign Declan Rice, who could be, upwards of 100 million, and then Caicedo, who could be 70, 80, like you're saying, and then address the other areas of the squad they need, like they need a centre-back. They probably need another forward as well. Whether they can do all that within the same window, I don't know. But a lot of it depends on outgoings. A lot of it depends on other things. So it's not impossible, I wouldn't say. I think, for Arsenal and for Arsenal fans, a summer of getting Rice and Caicedo in would be superb. But I think also what makes it difficult with Caicedo is it's not just Arsenal who are interested, is it? Man U are probably interested. Liverpool are interested. I'm sure Chelsea would like him. I've heard some stuff about Real Madrid as well. I think maybe he did an interview saying that Real Madrid's his dream. He seems to have a lot of dreams in terms of the teams he wants to go to. But listen, the reason is, again, because he's a very good player, and Brighton have unearthed yet another gem. So Brighton have signed him down to a new contract, and listen, they've got themselves into a very intelligent position, so they can kind of charge whatever they want for him.
Well, Kai, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to hear your insight on the Gunners. Just before you leave, it is tradition after all. What is your score prediction into this match?
It's a really hard one to predict, especially because I don't know what impact that 5-1 defeat on Monday will have on Brighton. I don't know if it will mean they'll want to come out and they'll be playing even better than they already would have done, or if it means they'll sort of lose confidence and go into their shells a bit more. I think with the confidence that Arsenal have, they'll have to go into this game, and everything that's on the line for them, they'll have to go into this game thinking they can win. I don't think it'll be easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I'd probably go for a 2-1 to Arsenal, but that's not with the kind of confidence that probably going up against a team who've just lost 5-1 to a team in the relegation zone should give you. But yeah, I think it'll be a really, really difficult game, but 2-1 to Arsenal just because of everything they need to do.
Oh, go on, Rich. Oh no, Richie, you go first. I want to hear yours.
Yeah, I think 2-1. I think it will be close, but I think Arsenal obviously I just think they'll have too much quality over the game, and also the bench. Brighton are quite a lot of injuries at the moment, and I just feel they have those sort of winners off the bench, and I think Brighton don't have that as in spades as much. So I think 2-1.
Yeah, Richie's thinking with his head there, which is very sensible. I'm going with my heart. I think we're going to get a result. I reckon 2-2. 2-2. Bit of drama at the Emirates. Why not?
Sounds good.
As ever. But yeah, look.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Kai. Once again, give us a shout out where we can find all your work.
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter at Kaya Kaynak 97. I'm also on Facebook, which is just Kaya Kaynak Journalist, and then football.london is where you can find my articles. If any of the Brighton fans fancy reading up on Arsenal this weekend and fancy doing a bit of their homework, you can find all that good stuff on the football.london website.
Excellent stuff. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe on YouTube, and to follow us on all the podcast platforms that you listen to, wherever you are. Enjoy the game if you're going to go. And as always, guys, up the Albion, and here's to a very exciting business end to the season.